live from Oakland, California. Welcome, listeners, to today's episode of the Black Business Roundtable. I am your host, Doug Blacksher, broadcasting to you live from the city of diversity, Oakland, California. This weekend, Saturday, August 27th, is the Oakland A's game against the New York Yankees and a drone light show afterward. So Oakland will literally light it up this weekend. A special thanks to our sponsor, Magnolia Engineering and Construction, for their continued Tammy on their website. That's politics in Oakland and latest updates in the August 31st special election for California's 18th Assembly District. It is down to the wire with just 5 days remaining. Return your ballot today via mail, official drop box locations, or vote in person. This is our last few days for this final voter push for our grassroots candidate. We also have joining us today a guest rooted here in the Bay Area, an author, past educator, nonprofit founder, serves as the chair of the Oakland's Community Policing Advisory Board, and a practicing attorney. This brother is one of a kind and lifting up our community because if you can see him, young brothers and sisters, you could be him.
Mhm. Mhm.
Our guest today includes, girl, I missed you so much last week and the week before that and the week before that. But last week I was on the sands of somewhere soaking it up. Dr. Ashley Coleman, Doctor of Psychology, Department Chair, Assistant Professor of Psychology at University of the West. We are happy to have her back after her surprise trip. Ooh, girl, I heard
Mhm.
about that trip. So missed our weekly therapeutic Thursday dose of Dr. Ashley. Dr. Ashley, I hope there was plenty of sand between your toes and margarita for your soul. However, do you prefer salt or no salt on your glass?
I'm old
Next,
enough to say no salt.
Dr. Ashley, going off script, I've been under a lot of stress just because you have not been here. So I'm glad you are back. Thank you. And you look wonderful. The sun
Thank you for
and
having
the
me.
time off has definitely blessed you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, attorney Janani Ramachandran, Esquire, pronounced Janani Ramachandran. I have to say that because I had to get used to saying it correctly. This sister is a Stanford University grad and Berkeley Law School grad and has served on the Oakland Public Ethics Committee. She is running in the California 18th Assembly District special election and is back to give us all the latest political sweet tea. August 31st is just 5 days away. Our final guest, and this brother, I served with him on the Oakland Police Community Advisory Board, CPAP. Oakland Police Community Advisory Board. This brother, Shar. Our final guest today is a gifted attorney, Creighton Davis Esquire. Creighton graduated with honors from Boston College, majoring in political science with a double minor in international studies and Middle Eastern studies. He has also attended New York University of Law.
Mhm.
He is the chair of the Oakland Community Policing Advisory Board and Also sits on the board of Orem Prep, a middle school in East Oakland, and the Center of Youth Development through Law.
Mhm.
My co-host Larry, my brother, he's unable to be with us today. But Larry, if you're out there, I know you got our back, man. Stay
Mhm.
strong, and we'll see you next Thursday. As we move forward, I'd like to say next Thursday I'm going to have some questions for Larry, because if any of you have been following the news today, some of our Marines were killed today, and
Mhm.
some of them were injured. We had 12
Mhm.
Marines who were uh, killed today,
Mhm.
and we had 15 Marines who were injured. I say this, and I say this emphatically. Our military, we appreciate the hard work that you're doing, and Marines, we got your back. We
Mhm.
have one on the show, Larry Lewis.
Mhm.
I mentioned this political race previously and will continue to do so on the Black Business Roundtable podcast. In 2020, she showed up and showed out, and with such professionalism as one of the first, as both an African American and as a woman prosecuting a presidential impeachment before the U.S. Senate. Talk about breaking through a glass ceiling. Never thought a sister would be impeaching a president, and a white president at that. Val Demings, 2022 Senate campaign, former Orlando police chief seeking to unseat little Marco Rubio. Little Marco Rubio, put your little tennis shoes on and grab your little bag and get to stepping, brother, because Val Deming is going to take your job and clean up the mess that you got going on down there in Florida. In Florida, running for the Senate, her tagline, never tire. Election date, November 8th, 2022. And now, for the news of the day. Dr. Ashley, please take it away.
Thank you, Doug. And so on this day in 1874, we want to talk about, and often we go here where we talk about trauma. And so today is the anniversary of 16 Black men being kidnapped from a Trenton, Tennessee jail and lynched. And if we think about how horrifying this event was, imagine being in jail and then at 2 in the morning, a group of approximately 400 to 500 masked white men who were mounted on horses and armed with shotguns demanded entrance into the Gibson County Jail. And that this mob confronted the jailer and threatened to kill him if he didn't grant them access to the Black men. And then after that jailer made that decision, the fate was sealed for these brothers. And so we just want to acknowledge, it's unfortunate how we have trauma then and now. And when we're talking about later on in the psychological medical minute and talking about how to take care of ourselves.
Right.
But here, just going a little deeper, since we have some more time, I think it's important for us to really understand what that looked like. Um, First want to thank the source of this story. That's really my first time hearing it, which is EJI, Equal Justice Initiative. So thank you, because most of our history has been preserved, again, through the passing of the narratives. But when we get back to this story and we think about the description, is that these brothers were riddled with bullets. All right. And so here, after a while, once some were shot, some were lynched. Unfortunately, also some were found at the bottom of a river, approximately 1 mile, again, from Trenton, Tennessee. And there was some discussion about justice. What did that look like? Well, local officials concluded that the men were killed by, quote, shots inflicted by guns in the hands of unknown parties. And even though the victims of violence had been Black, the town mayor expressed concern that local white people were in danger because Black people throughout the county might be planning to retaliate. And so, again, just want to honor the brothers of Trenton, Tennessee. And it's amazing how we've gone from um, witnessing violence in person, the hearsay of stories of Black men being lynched, to then this continuing thread of violence and trauma now captured on television, often through, courageous people willing to capture this through cell phone footage. And if what would happen if we didn't have this cell phone data?
Dr. Ashley, that is so important that you pointed that out.
Mm-hmm.
And since we have a few extra minutes here, the George Floyd tape,
Mm-hmm.
the young girl who had the courage, even when the
Mm-hmm.
police, I'm sure she was scared of
Mm-hmm.
many things at that age. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't even imagine being 17 and seeing that and then just having a mindset to keep videoing,
Mm-hmm.
go live. What, and let me just ask, since we have our doctor back, what do you think go in the minds of people, especially young people now? Because young people have a whole different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I hear so many times, I ain't taking that. I ain't. So how? What can we do as a society
Mm-hmm.
that could articulate and educate our brothers and sisters to don't get mad and jump out and want to fight. Record it. Keep your composure. And I liken that to when I was going through this legal thing. Uh, uh, every day, I didn't know if I was winning or losing, but and it was in my mind and in my heart and in my soul. It was God. I already know it. It was
Mm-hmm.
God. It just kept think, think. So I'm going to let you speak, but tell this audience how this is impacting our young people and how us, and I don't say you, I say us, how us old people can help educate our people to start thinking. Thank you.
Yes, no. So I think one of the things is I'm young enough and old enough to remember Rodney King, and I remember the verdict, and I was, even as a young girl, I was shocked that the initial verdict was non guilty because I saw the footage live with my parents. And at that time, we thought, oh, with footage, absolutely, there's proof. And so there is something called in psychology the bystander effect. And the bystander effect says that when we witness something happening, often we can have a traumatic response that's a fight or flight or a freeze response. And in the bystander effect, often a group may freeze, waiting also for one person to step up, assuming that someone else is going to take that courageous first step. And what has happened, and it's based on an issue that happened, a violent scenario that happened with an attack of a woman, and a whole mob was there and froze, and no one intervened. What we've learned from the bystander effect is that when that first person steps up, who is being very courageous, putting themselves on the line, what's also really important is a second person stepping up. So protecting that whistleblower, that witness, if you will. And I think with our youth and that young sister who was willing to record is, if there's no documentation, I would, I'm going back to pen and paper, it didn't happen, right? And you know that with your lawsuits, that if there's no documentation of it, it didn't happen. And so now we are empowered with these phones, and our youth know how to use them better. Even though I'm team under 40, I'm never surprised by how I learn about different things from my goddaughter or my baby cousins who know how to work my phone better than me. But the idea is sometimes this is the protection that we have. This is that moment where we can say, you know what, whatever happens to me, I will have proof. And but there is a decision tree moment. Do I want to intervene? What could happen to me if I intervene? I think many of us have seen stories or heard of, for instance, when there's recently, I can't recall the city, but there was a fight happening, a physical fight happening between um, young ladies, and a man went to intervene, and unfortunately he was killed. And so we have to bear witness to, anytime we are stepping into something, we have to take inventory of the risk. And then also, so she put herself out there. She did. She put herself out there, and without that footage, we have no idea if this would have even gone as far to as a conviction. And so I think our youth, though, have a great sense of self. Like you said, they have this attitude of, I'm not going to take it. I think they're also raised by generations who have really empowered them, in various cities, with knowledge of the civil rights movement. But they're bold. The youth are bold, and I'm so excited, and grateful that they are. Oh, Doug, you're muted. We can,
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ashley.
no
In
problem.
any situation, in every situation on this show, your answers are consistent with someone who has been educated and is at the top of their profession to help our people sustain the mental fortitude that it's going to take to move the black agenda. And I say black agenda because um, previously we've discussed how black people are at the bottom of every poll, whether it
Mm,
be economics, whether it be health, whether it be education, whether it be social, mental. We appear to be at the bottom,
mm,
and that concerns me.
mhm,
Two things here. First off, we have got to uplift ourselves. Hey, Janani.
mhm. Hi,
and,
Janani.
and
Hi.
and the second thing is we have got to start mentally preparing these young kids to think
Mhm,
and
mhm,
not be afraid to reach out to doctors such as yourself that will arm them with the mental fortitude that it's going to take to get them through. So we have this outstanding candidate for assembly member AD 18 on the line. Dr. Ashley, do you mind if I let her take it away?
Please do. Please do. Hi, Janani. So happy to have you back.
Hi, happy to be here. Thank you once again for the kind invitation to let me say a few words before this election, which is just 5 days away. I'm always in my car nowadays on Thursdays because I am hitting the streets. I'm on a hill somewhere in East Oakland, walking up and down in the heat, but this is what gives me joy and life. And we have to do this because we are a grassroots campaign. We are not taking contributions from the gambling industry, from big pharmaceuticals, from massive tech companies, from corporations that are trying to buy this election. No, we are powered by the people. So we're putting in the work.
I'd like to say this. I got some literature that show the other person, your opponent, is taking money from law enforcement. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. My opponent says that she is for police accountability and reform, and said originally she was not going to take any money from police unions. That has changed. There's been a recent independent expenditure that includes a $50,000 contribution from a police union and a prison guardian. And this is a lot of money. And the thing is, you can't be pro reform when you're being influenced and being paid so much money by institutions that are against that reform. And that is why I am proud to be a corporate dollar free candidate. And I am excited to show people that you can not take their money and you can still win.
Dr. Ashley, I have a couple of questions I'd like to shoot at our soon to be assembly member representing Oakland, San Leandro, and Alameda, Janani. Janani. This is your last pre election moment on our show to fire up the eligible base of voters. Money in politics surely is a hot button topic as per your recent debates. And I saw that debate. You you are awesome, young lady. How can voter how can a voter see where both you and your competitors' political donations come from?
Yeah, you can see that online. You can Google my opponent's name, and then hyphen contributions, and you can see where they come from. There's $250,000 from the gambling industry. There's almost $500,000 from big pharmaceutical companies, the same ones that are driving up our drug prices. You can see several $100,000 from large corporate real estate developers who are not for affordable housing and stronger tenant protections. You can see tons of money flowing in from companies that violate labor laws, that are against workers' rights. And, you know, those are exactly the kinds of things, types of contributions that are blocking the change that we want to see. For example, you take Medicare for All, which would be a universal single payer healthcare system. Over 70% of Californians are ready for this. This would help small businesses not have to bear the costs of paying health insurance. This would support people who can't afford the high cost of health insurance premiums and soaring drug prices, not have to shoulder that burden. And it would save our state billions of dollars. The only people who it would harm are shareholders in health insurance companies and big pharma, and they're the ones trying to buy these elections to block that change from happening.
Well, you pretty much answered my second question because it was who are the top corporate donors are in your competitors' campaign? You put it out there: medical, law enforcement, medical, which will keep those the medical costs high, the pharmacy, which will keep the drugs high, and the law enforcement that you cannot be biased if they buying you. I like that one.
Hmm?
Okay, who are the top corporate donors in your campaign?
Nobody, because
Wait a minute. Wait. What? You have no corporate money in your campaign.
not a penny.
Unbelievable.
And you know what people say? Well, then how are you going to raise money to fuel a special election? Let me tell you, we've raised almost $500,000 through small dollar individual donors. A lot of people chipping in a little bit of something because they believe in your vision, in your dream, and the movement that can take us far. And it's gotten us this far.
Well, I want to tell you this, and I'm going to ask my last question and let Dr. Ashley fire one off. I'm fired up because last weekend, you, I, and Brandy were out there hitting the road, and people go, "Who's Brandy?" Brandy is my companion and my dog. We have pictures of us on Facebook, and we have so many likes that we're gonna have to do another the threesome picture again because I was extremely tired walking with you. You have the energy of so Brandy basically pulled me along to help you. But I was so encouraged about all the people, and we stopped at I don't know at least 20 homes. Every home said, and this is not you saying this, this is me saying this, John and Nani. Every home said that they voted for you and they didn't vote for the other person. And I'm going to say this because we laughed about what the person said. They said two Bontas is too many. So I don't know if that's stuck in your head, but that really stuck in my head. So let me ask you this last question. Um, are there any other surprising campaign money facts our audience should understand that often shape our local political landscape? I'm gonna put it on mute.
Yeah, there's some really, really problematic contributions coming in from the gambling industry. And this is this is important because even if you don't believe in, some of the issues, some of the liberal issues that we're talking about, most people from across the political spectrum believe money laundering is a crime and should not be supported. And so there are some casinos that have had their licenses revoked and have been sued for millions of dollars by our former state attorney general, Javier Becerra. Sued by him, and now trying to curry favor with the current attorney general by offering thousands of dollars to my opponent, to Rob Bonta's wife. And that is problematic on so many levels.
Wait a minute. Who is your opponent again? So to my audience, I didn't hear that. I want to make sure we're all clear that the gambling people who are giving thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to your opponent, the previous attorney general did what? And the relationship to the person you're running against is how related to the one who was appointed to that office now? Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, but so we have clarity. Thank you.
Exactly. Some of these casinos who had their licenses revoked and were sued by the former attorney general are now paying my opponent, Mia Banta, through campaign contributions, without doubt, to curry favor with Rob Banta, our current attorney general. And for some reason, we people accept this as business as usual politics. This is nothing short of bribery, legalized corruption. It should be illegal, but for whatever reasons it's not, and we need to make sure that it comes to an end. And here's an interesting fact about corporate contributions. There's enough money in national politics as well, plenty of money in Congress. But it's harder to make a contribution for a congressional campaign, because corporations are not allowed to make a direct contribution. For state assembly and California State Senate, on the other hand, it is so easy to drop a $4,900 check as a direct contribution. So why are our standards higher for congressional races than our own state races in Democratic California?
Well, I'm sure once you get into Sacramento and next week, and we get you all situated, I can assure you, I see some great things ahead of you in resolving these issues. Dr. Ashley, do you have a question for our soon-to-be assembly member?
Well, actually, Janani, as always, I appreciate your boldness. I just want to cue our listeners into opportunities with these 5 days left to utilize their support for you. So I have the honor of just making a couple of announcements. First and foremost, you can always find out information about our candidate at www.janani4ca.com. And so this weekend, opportunities, it sounds like, include Saturday, August 28th, visibility events at 3 local farmers markets. And there are also reoccurring daily canvassing and literature drop opportunities, August 26th to the 31st. Please go to the website for more information and also to get trained and set up with the materials. Again, this show definitely supports you, as you know, Janani, and we really, again, hope that these next 5 days are the push that you need and that the, efforts are reflected in the outcome.
Thank you.
And I would like to say, Janani, I look forward and you and I getting together at 10 o'clock, hitting up coffee shops, which we will start from Saliandro. And I have a list of places, stores, businesses along the MacArthur Boulevard area. And I don't know if we'll be able to bring Brandy this time because we're going to be in and out, but it's critical. Audience, it's critical. Whoever wins, they're Democrats, and we will support them. So win, lose, or I won't say draw, but win or lose, we're going to get together and unite as one Democratic Party. Janani, I got your back. I'll see you in the morning. And as they say, I listening to the drums on the street. You are sounding really good. Okay, so keep up the good work, and we
Dr.
appreciate you coming on the show. Next week
Awesome.
you'll be back because we want to hear your we want to hear all about it next Thursday. Thank you.
Bye, Janani.
Moving forward, Dr. Ashley,
Yes.
let me be clear. Our weekly check-in with our very own Dr. Ashley Coleman, Doctor of Psychology. Last week, Larry spoke about Afghanistan
Mm,
from a veteran's point of view. Can you give us an idea or some kind of perspective on the
mhm,
world event stress, anxiety,
mhm.
students returning to school, and COVID-19 anxiety, parents' anxiety, and returning to work? Thank you. I'm going to put it on mute.
Sure, absolutely. Wow. Well, here we are, another fall, right? Another fall. And this is often the transition in seasons and the ushering in of a new academic year. And there's usually excitement. People in the aisles picking out folders or highlighters, or for some of my students, scanning the syllabi to see how many exams Dr. Coleman will be giving in such classes. But this is a new day. This is a new approach. We cannot deny that we have been in a pandemic now for what seems like eternity at times, but approximately 18 months. And this is now for our students going back to school, a new normal that is very anxiety provoking. So I want to start with anxiety. When we have any type of anxious reaction or emotional reaction in general, that's a signal to us. Emotions are signals, and what can often be uncomfortable if we allow ourselves to just feel it, it's just like, what is my body trying to tell me? When our hearts race, when our hands get clammy, when we start sweating, that is our body kicking up for a perceived threat. And so, again, I want to start with leading up to days to school. For some of our children, some of us may remember the first day of school, the excitement pre first day of school. What am I going to wear? How am I going to see my friends? Now, parents are getting their children ready, but having different talks. Whereas maybe that used to be make sure you pay attention in class, make sure now it's also make sure you have your mask on. Do you have your hand sanitizer? Do you remember what we talked about maybe sharing food, not sharing food? And so, depending on the age of your child, those conversations are different. I know that some parents have been consulting with me. They have elementary age children who are at one, ineligible for the vaccination, and two are returning to, and they've made the decision to have their child return to in-person school. And so, what that means is that their child who attends a school in the Los Angeles Unified School District is routinely tested for COVID. In addition to that, where the child used to like to jump out of the car, kiss their parent, and say, okay, and wait for their friends, now the child has to be walked all the way in. There's a long line where each child, where the parent has to scan a code, a barcode that demonstrates and shows proof that their child has been tested. And if the result is positive, the child and the parent have to return back to the car. And so what that means is that the first day of school for the LAUSD, which was actually this past Monday, August 23rd, the system crashed. The system crashed. So that meant parents that were dropping their students off and trying to get to work or had some, it truly, and as you can imagine, Los Angeles traffic, Bay Area traffic, the traffic jam, but all these things are stressors. We can't prepare for everything, but one of the things we do is can come up with a plan. And then my first recommendation is be flexible and adapt. Be flexible and adapt. So what does that mean? Planning for extra time, having a plan, planning for extra time to drop your student off, drop your child off, actually having talks with your child about what school is going to look like, checking in. I know we had the mental health panel, about a month ago, where we had other professionals talking about checking in with your child about how did their day go. But first and foremost, how does your child feel about going back to school? And asking questions. What excites you about going back to school? What makes you nervous about going back to school? Um, and that way you're normalizing having a variety of reactions. What will you do if you start to feel uncomfortable while you're in the classroom? Right? So, kind of anticipating and equipping your child with problem solving techniques. If for some reason they're in the classroom and they don't feel comfortable, they don't feel safe, they want to go to the bathroom, is that telling them to raise their hand and talk to their teacher? Parents, have you talked to not other your co-parent, but also other parents about their strategies? Have you had time to try to get in front of an administrator, really figuring out and finding out what your rights are, what the school's plan is? And it's okay to ask those things, right? And to really dive into, because you want a peace of mind as a parent that your baby is safe. And so again, just kind of looking into um, wanting to empower our parents to ask questions, empowering students to ask questions, but the anxiety is real and it's going to take time to subside. We know. So if you're noticing, as a parent or a person in general, with the COVID-19 news coverage is overwhelming, there can be tension between wanting to be informed and being overwhelmed, right? So that may mean limiting your sources of data, but also limiting the amount of time that you're consuming this information. So we call this in psychology, there's an intervention called worry time. Sometimes many of us can worry about something and it can take over the day. So what we're trying to do is, when we worry, we know that we really feel that this situation is important and it has the potential to really impact us significantly. So worry time is setting a time to say, you know what, I don't want to think about this. And what about school and a mask and vaccination? But not avoiding, but setting a time to say, okay, at 5 o'clock, I'm going to seek the sources. I'm going to consult trusted voices. And this is the time when I'm going to make the decision and the plan. And so worry time is something that can just really help us go from being overwhelmed and flooded. Because when we're overwhelmed, that's when not just fight, flight, it's usually flight and freak out happens. And then we can freeze and just say, I don't want to deal with it. And we have to deal with the realities of COVID.
Can I didn't mean to interrupt you, but can you
Please.
say that one more time about turning your mind off? Don't put any more information, negative or positive, but just turning it off, disconnecting. Say that one more time, because a lot of our audience think you just got to keep pouring it in, pouring. And to me, I know if you keep pouring in, you'll blow a fuse, you'll go crazy. So say that again to our audience. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think we underestimate how much screen time we've had during this pandemic in efforts to not have gaps in our productivity, for our businesses. In addition to that, to remain connected to our loved ones that we couldn't see in person. But there is so much literature that talks about the connection between screen time and sleep disruption and sleep deprivation. And so back in the day, again, young enough to remember when I used to take my parents' cell phones to Jack London Square to the movies with my homegirls, but and old enough to remember when minutes were free after 9 and when we used to actually turn our cell phones off. People will say, no, I don't want to turn my cell phone off. Sleep hygiene is really important. Can you put it on silent after a certain hour? Can you, I really encourage people, if they're going to make important decisions. I'm a morning person. Some people are night owls, but can you separate it a couple hours before you're going to start powering down to allow your body to get in a state of easing into sleep? Is there soothing music? Is there a candle? Is there aromatherapy? But if you breaking news, right? Just with the stories in Afghanistan, just with the time difference, the breaking news stories and what's happening all over the world, and floods and earthquakes, that can come in, and then that sets us off again, fight, flight, freeze, freak out. So allowing time, maybe 90 minutes before your desired time to get in the bed, start that routine of powering down. We can always put our phones on do not disturb with some emergency contacts who can break through and access. So again, just we need the rest and restoration for our immune systems and for our peace of minds.
Dr. Ashley, I have to put this out there because I am much older than you. So I remember when I thought I had stress or duress, and I don't know if you remember my father, but one thing he would say is, "Boy," and I've said it, so I'm gonna say it again. "Boy, you're stressed out. Go out in the backyard and take those bricks on that side of the yard and put them on that side." And then I wouldn't put them on that side. And he said, "Now, I want you to put them back so I'll make sure that you don't get stressed out anymore today." And we have come to a different era in society, and especially Black people. Now, this is not a black or white issue. This is a factual issue. White people see it counseling, and other groups of people see counseling far greater than Black people. In addition to that, we don't have counselors out there like yourself who understands the Black problem. So, two things here. First off, can you encourage the older crew, the OGs and the triple OGs and the double OGs, how important that therapy is? And second, most important, how it can strengthen the mind of our young people, because suicide is on the rise right now. Thank you, Doctor.
It is. And also, before I address those questions, Doug, we have a question about just some apps. There's the Calm app that can help with meditation and sleep. And there is also a Worry Time app. There are a bunch of apps out there, but another one is called Reach Out Worry Time that can help, again, one, deactivate themselves and really engage themselves into a calm state. But what I want to share about therapy can be a very safe space. It's a confidential space. What that means is, if I am someone's therapist, and even if Harvey from TMZ calls and asks me, "Oh, are you working with so and so?" I can never confirm or deny that I've ever met with any of my clients. Everything that is said in therapy remains confidential, with a few exceptions.
Can
And
you say that again? Because
yes, absolutely.
and I want you to liken it that you are an attorney in that sense, so you can't
Yeah.
divulge anything. Thank you. Go
Right.
ahead.
So
Go
we're
ahead.
talking about, again, there can be our guests coming on in a few minutes. We'll talk about, again, attorney, client privilege. Very similar in psychology. We have therapist client or therapist patient privilege, which means it is a ethical value of confidentiality. We cannot confirm or deny that we have ever met with clients, and we only have very narrow times when we break confidentiality, and that's to keep the client safe. That doesn't mean that we broadcast anything. It doesn't matter. I've worked in faith-based communities. I let my clients know, if I see you in public, I will not acknowledge you. And that's not because I am being rude. That's to protect your confidentiality. But if a client comes up to me and wants to engage with me, I'll say hello and just explain that. But privacy is a constitutional right. And again, confidentiality is also a privilege. And so it's important for people to understand, to all of our listeners, it can be a very safe space where you go and unpack and discover new things about yourself. I like to liken it to the gym. We go to the gym for many reasons, not just to lose weight. We go to the gym. We can gain weight, gain muscle, just for relaxation, for our minds, just to celebrate what our bodies can do to maintain wellness. And therapy is a place where we can maintain and grow in wellness. And so I just really want to encourage our listeners to consider therapy. As you mentioned, Doug, the rates of suicide attempts and completions are up. The rates of substance abuse, of intimate partner violence, of eating disorders and the likes, of depression. And there are, for our listeners who want Black and brown faces, there is the Association of Black Psychologists, ABPSI, which was
Say
yes,
that. Say
yes.
that again, because I have a lot of brothers and sisters say, "Well, if I'm going to see a psychologist, I want to make sure they're white, and I want to make sure, just like what you said." I used to watch The Sopranos, and one of the main characters. I don't know if you ever watched The
Oh
Sopranos,
yeah, I loved it. Uh-huh.
but Tony, when he was out a couple of times. He saw a psychologist, a therapist, and he didn't know whether to go say something or not, but hammer home how important it is for you to keep that discretion.
Hmm.
They're not. A lot of people go, "Well, they're gonna go tell them what I said." No, they're not. So go ahead, Doc.
So I just want to make some cases again. Confidentiality is of the utmost of the profession. For those that are interested in sources particularly geared for providing therapy for Black men, I want to put a plug for therapyforblackmen.org. Again, therapyforblackmen.org. There's also a website, therapyforblackgirls.com, and that can also include Black women, but therapyforblackgirls.com, therapy for Black girls, for blackmen.org, and then also the Association of Black Psychologists. And you can also search on Psychology Today. So there are resources out there. We just ask that um, if you try one session and if you don't have a fit, just like with a medical doctor, it can be frustrating, but that you try again because your wellness is worth it.
Once again, Dr. Ashley, it is great to have you back. Oh, there go our special guest, young brother out there making a difference. Our next mayor, congressman, senator, and possibly president. Uh, uh, Dr. Ashley, can you read our sponsorship so we can immediately break into Mr. Creighton Davis, Esquire? Thank you.
Absolutely. So we want to thank Mr. Donnie Glover of Black USA News and BeMoreNews.com, and want to welcome our viewers to also tune in to Sister Biz with Nicole and Tamara on Wednesdays. Please also check out Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard on Fridays, and learn more about one of our main sponsors, Ms. Tammy Willis, owner of Magnolia Engineering and Construction. For more information, please visit her website, www.magnoliaengineeringandconstruction.com. We want to be a part of growing with our community of Oakland. Connect with Magnolia Engineering and Construction now on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Back to you, Doug.
Dr. Ashley, you've made up for three to 4 weeks and 30 to 45 minutes. Girl, I love you. Thank you, Dr. Ashley. All right, let's welcome Creighton Davis. Mr. Davis was born in San Francisco, I think let me get everyone to mute their, okay, thank you very much. So I want to make sure our audience get the full impact of Mr. Davis. So I'm going to start again. Let's welcome Creighton Davis. Mr. Davis was born in San Francisco, California, and now lives in Oakland. After graduating from high school, he attended Boston College, and while there, he was a member of the Division I swim team. This brother is fast. This brother is fast. The water people, people, and those that know me know I can barely float. He also pursued part of his education at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London and the American University in Cairo. After college, Mr. Creighton David was a middle school teacher in the South Bronx, and then went on to the University of New York, or excuse me, New York University School of Law. Mr. Creighton, Mr. Creighton David, that's why. May I call you Creighton?
Oh yeah, please call me Creighton. Please just call me Creighton.
First off, I want our audience to get a feel, a flavor of your age. Can you tell? See, if you was a woman, I couldn't ask you that. Can you tell can you tell our audience first? I want to let them know how young brothers out there are making a difference and getting that law degree. You could have ran off with this resume. You could have ran off and worked for any big corporation, making probably 10 times what you make now. Can you tell our audience what your age is, sir? Please.
I am 34 years young.
Ooh, when I was 34 years old, man, I was so busy chasing money that I didn't think about the community. So I'm going to congratulate you just starting there. A 34-year-old brother with your background out there doing some of the stuff we're going to be talking about here today. So let's dig right into this.
Appreciate
What was your educational undergrad pathway prior to law school? Thank you, sir. I'm going to go on mute.
Thank you very much, Doug, and thank you very much, Dr. Ashley. First of all, I just want to say it's just a privilege to be here with you guys today. Such an honor and such an opportunity as well, just to be engaged in this conversation. I was listening earlier just on your discussion about therapy, and I recently started doing therapy back in May, and
Nice.
it took a long time trying to find the right therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Whole process, and I got to give a shout out to my sister, who has been really an advocate for therapy and mental health. But you know, it's tough. It's tough to kind of jump in because it's a new process. But for me, it was really helpful and powerful, because you know, so many times you have these thoughts and you have these feelings that are inside of you, and you don't actually articulate in voice. And the actual process of talking things out, you start listening to yourself and you think, wow, that's oh wow, that's why I reacted to a situation in that way. Or I never thought about that, even though I just mentioned it, you know? And it's
Look, Craig, I gotta say something. I'm sure you heard it a few minutes ago. Times have changed. See, I'm 58 years old. I'm not embarrassed, and I'm proud to say I'm 58. But when I had problems, and Dr. Ashley, she get ready to start laughing, because my dad would always say, boy, you're stressed, you're depressed. Go out in the backyard and take those rocks, all those rocks over there, and move them on the other side of the yard. Then I would go do it. And then he come out and say, you know what? I want to make sure you're not depressed and stressed anymore. So take them and put them back over there. So our culture, the Black culture, has this almost taboo, like, well, if you go see a psychologist, you crazy. Yeah. I'm glad you shared that story with us, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's that taboo that we really have to break, because it doesn't serve us at the end of the day. And it's, you know, whether you go to therapy or do other kinds of, you know, mental health treatments, it's very important, because we, you know, as you mentioned, I was a swimmer. I still run. Exercise is a really important thing to me, and it's a way to relieve stress. But there's another aspect, the mental health, that can be addressed through exercise to a degree, but doesn't kind of address the full picture. So, you know, Dr. Ashley, Doug, I really appreciate you both mentioning that in the prior segment, because I think it's so important, particularly now as we're still in this pandemic and still dealing with the dislocation and distance that the coronavirus has required us to have. So thank you both for bringing that up. Now, with respect to your question, the educational pathway prior to law school, you know, I think a lot of people answer this question in kind of sequences. Yeah, I went to high school, then I went to college, then I got a job as a teacher, got a master's degree while I was teaching, and then went to law school. But for me, that definitely played an important role. But for me, it was really the experiences that were outside of the classroom that shaped my perspectives and shaped the direction that I wanted to take in life. And some of those experiences started at a pretty young age. When I was in high school, I did a service trip to East Los Angeles, and I was staying in Aliso Gardens and Pico Village down in East LA, and was exposed to a different community there that was dealing with a lot of different issues than what I was familiar with. We went down to Skid Row and just saw the thousands and thousands of unhoused folks that were living on the streets, and the folks that were helping them through nonprofits and other kinds of services. And that opened my eyes to, you know, what was out there in terms of trying to help people, but also what some of the challenges and issues were. And then when I was working in East LA, during that week of that service trip, I was exposed to an organization called Homeboy Industries. And Homeboy Industries, I mean, this was back, I think, in 2002 or 2003. They were a pioneer in reentry work, helping folks who were either former gang members or formerly incarcerated re-enter into society and not discard them, not see them as less than, and provide them with a place and an opportunity to really develop skills where they could really help the community and also help themselves reintegrate into society. And that was something that, you know, we know that every life, every person has meaning and potential, but so oftentimes society tells us different. And to see the actual embodiment of that kind of work in practice and seeing such good organizations inspired me. And I tucked it away and thought, okay, well, this would be a good approach to kind of solving an issue related to criminal justice and over incarceration. So that's one example, one experience that really had an impact on me. And then, you know, when I went to college, I had the opportunity, as you mentioned, I studied abroad. I studied in London and then Cairo, Egypt. And particularly in Cairo and my travels around Cairo to Israel, to Palestine, to Ethiopia, I became acutely aware of the impact of governments and the impact of policies on people and the impact of structures and systems on people, and how an authoritarian government can create such harm and such inequality for folks that are living there, fear and displacement at times, and being exposed to that and understanding the importance of governments and systems was another, you know, vivid experience that I kind of tucked away and thought, okay, well, how can I kind of make an impact on systems and structures so that, you know, whether it's abroad or at home, you know, we have more equity and more access for people who are just trying to get by and live productive lives. And then, you know, following college, I went to the South Bronx and became a teacher. And that was another just really pivotal experience that taught me so much and really led me to going to law school.
You know, I just want to say this is the second week consistently and consecutively that we had a young brother who has traveled to outside of this country, who wasn't rapping and slapping and snapping, but went out there and learned and brought that back to be a teacher, to be an influencer. And we don't have young people like you out there thinking this way. We got people, I'm gonna get a college degree or be a basketball player, football player, and I'm gonna get rich. Well, while one person's getting rich, a whole race of people are almost dying and starving out. We have got to start reaching back. So big kudos to you, my brother. Second question. Oh.
And if I could just quickly just respond to that, you know, I appreciate that, Doug. You know, travel for me was something that just, you know, opened the curtain, opened the screen door, you know, and exposed me to so much because, you know, you meet people, you meet different people in different circumstances than your own. And you realize that there are ways to connect and you understand them better and you understand what their histories are. And, you know, you mentioned at the start of your show, we live in a diverse city, Oakland. When I went to Ethiopia, now I understand when I speak to Ethiopians here in Oakland, an aspect of, you know, where they're from and the culture and the experience and the history and the challenges. Same with Egypt and some of the other places that I've traveled to. So it not only, you know, opens my eyes, but also gives me a better ability to understand and to connect. And if we're talking about systems and structures, then we can start creating systems and structures that are able to be nuanced and to address issues in specific communities as well.
Brother, lay it on us, because it's coming on good. Lay it on us. Hey, my next question before Dr. Ashley shoots one off at you. How did you become involved in Teach for America and become a social studies middle school teacher? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. You know, kind of by chance and accident, to be quite honest with you, you know, you had mentioned chasing money and doing those things. That's what I initially wanted to do. I was set to graduate from college with $110,000 in student loan debt. So that burden, that cloud was just, you know, sitting over me, and I knew I had to address it somehow. So I started looking at, you know, some of the big banks, Goldman Sachs, Citi, AIG, started thinking about, okay, going through the application process with those organizations. And, you know, as I was going through it, it just didn't sit right. It didn't feel right. And that's not to disparage any of those jobs, but it's just, you know, what was inside of me. And I felt deep inside that, you know, I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to do something meaningful within the community, but I didn't quite know what it was. And actually, quite tragically, I became a teacher because of someone in Oakland, actually. His name was Dr. John Dennis. He was a professor at St. Mary's College in Moraga. He was a deacon over at, I think it was a church on 82nd Street. Remind me if any of you know what the name is. Is it St.
That's not St. Benedict.
St. Benedict's, that's right.
Yeah.
St. Benedict's. He was a deacon over at St. Benedict's, and he was a close family friend. I grew up, you know, going over to his house in Oakland. He was a close family friend with my dad, and he was somebody I really looked up to. He had a PhD from Stanford. He was deeply involved in the community, and he was somebody I looked up to. And one morning, I was in Boston still at the time in my senior year, and I got a call from my mom, and she said, Dr. D was murdered. And I said, what? She was like, yeah, he was murdered. Dr. D was murdered. And I was completely shocked, completely shocked. That's not something that you expect, not somebody like him. And I had no background on what happened, why it happened. So I started just trying to do research. This was a Tuesday, I believe. Started to do research and trying to figure out, you know, reading articles, what happened, why did it happen? Got a little more information, but ended up stumbling upon a blog that was set up by some of his former students at St. Mary's and other places, and student after student after student after student wrote down, Dr. D changed my life. Dr. D was somebody that inspired me, and I would not be where I was but for Dr. D. Dr. D made me think of the world in a different way. And as I read that and as I was mourning, I thought, this is the type of impact that I want to have. This is the type of, you know, path that I want to take after graduation. Yeah.
I gotta say that. Dr. Ashley laughed because she goes, he's always got to say something. When we have tragic situations in our lives, a lot of brothers fall into drugs, depression, alcohol. Tell us, and I'm using you as an example now because this man made an impact on you. Tell our audience how you said, hey, instead of me getting so depressed I'm gonna fall apart, what you did to move forward and make a difference, because we still have a long way to go, and we haven't even scraped the surface of what you've been doing. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it was his, example that inspired me. It was his legacy that inspired me. And, he was the type of guy. I remember after my freshman year, he came over to our house and he asked me the question, how often did you go to class? And I said, what do you mean, how often did I go to class? And the answer was, I didn't go to class that often my freshman year, my first semester. And he got on me. And I didn't like that when he got on me. I didn't like that. I tensed up. I was like, oh, why is he telling me what to do? I did all right. I got a B+ average, what have you. And I thought about it, though. And, he inspired me. And he was that type of person that was inspiring to me. And that legacy, of inspiration, of impact that he had was what I wanted to take to the South Bronx. And I ended up, I think he was murdered on a Tuesday, and the final application deadline for Teach for America was that Friday. So it just happened like that. I submitted the application and then applied to Teach for America, and the stars aligned, and I was able to get in and wanted to teach high school, was set on teaching high school because I thought, okay, those kids are going to be the most receptive to the message and to, what I was trying to bring to the table. And of course, I got stuck with middle school, 6th graders. I wanted to teach in Brooklyn because I wanted to teach a predominantly African-American student population. I got placed in the Bronx, which was African-American, but Dominican and Puerto Rican and a whole bunch of, different mixes of people. But most people don't know the South Bronx is one of the poorest, if not the poorest, congressional district in the country. So I was at a school, I was placed at a school that was completely isolated. It was on a thoroughfare right in the middle of the South Bronx with no subways around it and just projects lining the street further down and nothing but tire shops and warehouses and one single McDonald's. So there wasn't much around it, but there was so much beauty at the same time because there were parks and there were kids there that had so much potential and so much promise. And it was a matter of just, lifting up the lid and saying, hey, listen, there's so much that can be done. And my first year, I failed. I failed over and over and over again. I was coming in with these big ideals and bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and those kids, those 6th graders, they handed it to me. And it wasn't until I learned and listened and humbled myself and understood what their specific histories, stories, backgrounds, experiences were that we started to connect. And I was able to change my complete curriculum away from just, putting up PowerPoint presentations and teaching at my students. And instead, what we did was they taught themselves through some of the curriculum that I provided. It was an empowerment-based model rather than somebody telling them what to think and what to read and what to believe. And that really changed the script. And after that first year, I approached the next 3 years of teaching in a similar way, where it was really not me talking at my students, but guiding them as they started to critically think about the world around them and how they could make an impact and how they can be empowered to make an impact. So as I was teaching, I was learning because there was a lot of stuff that I didn't get taught growing up. So I didn't know about, all the West African civilizations of Ghana, Mali, what have you, and I was learning. And then teaching about, our history in this country from a position and from a narrative of empowerment that we, despite everything that we've been dealt and that we've had to undergo, we're still here and we're thriving. And that is a completely different narrative than, what I was taught. And, teaching that and learning and then having my kids engage in a critical manner, was really, really important and changed the way, I taught. And at the end of the day, we also really focused on exposure. How can we expose kids to what else exists outside of the neighborhood, the block, the school? that was really, really important because, you know, you can't imagine going to college if you can't see it, if you can't access that thought. It's just something that somebody tells you. So we did college trips, but we also did hiking on the Appalachian Trail. We did Broadway shows. We saw in the high. We also did summer programs where they read books like The Hunger Games and what was it called? Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And some of the, I'm sure a lot of folks haven't heard that title in a while. But, you know, really expanding, you know, what is possible. And, you know, not all of them went to college. Not all of my students went to college, but they are all critically thinking young people that are good people. And that's the thing I'm most proud of.
Creighton, I just have to acknowledge the passion in which you speak. And as a fellow educator, it's just, I'm smiling as I hear you talk about, and I don't want to infantilize them, but like your babies, you know, and you can see that connection as you're talking about it. I'm just going to read a sponsor moment and we're going to return. I have some questions. I want to hear more about SWAG, the nonprofit that you founded. So let's hear another sponsorship. We want to thank Mr. Donnie Glover of BlackUSA.News and BeMoreNews.com, and want to welcome our listeners and invite them to tune into Chap and Friends on Mondays and Party Marty Let's Talk on Tuesdays. And again, a special thank you to Magnolia Engineering and Construction, whose vision is to further the presence of Black women in the construction and engineering industry through key partnerships and building contracts in the municipal, government, and transportation sectors. Now, Creighton, if we can come back to you, can you tell us about Serving While Achieving Greatness SWAG? And before you do that, I just also want to let you know that I'm in Los Angeles, and I was happy to hear you talk about Homeboy Industries. It's still thriving in East LA and downtown, still thriving. And the university where I'm employed, University of the West, some of our students are graduates of Homeboy's Industries. So really excited to hear you plug them. They're doing excellent work 20 years later after your visit. And so I'm not surprised in hearing your journey, reaching back, pulling forward, and, you know, really receiving your mentor's baton to carry that torch and to expose and just give hope, right? That's what a lot of our students needs, is just hope that they can persevere. So please tell us about SWAG.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Dr. Ashley. And, you know, you mentioned something just a few moments ago, just about the kids being, you know, my babies and, you know, my kids. And it was so true, because at the end of the day, I saw myself in them. Those kids were me. And to see me in those kids and to understand, oh yeah, a kid that's talking in the corner of the classroom, he's not bad, he's just talking, you know, and not to see that as, you know, like a fault or a character flaw, you know. And that's why I think it's so important to have you know, African-American educators in the classroom, because it's just a different relationship. It's a different level of perspective and connection. Because, you know, we live in a society of biases and all kinds of stereotypes. And, you know, that's not to say that, you know, we don't also hold stereotypes as well, but it's just a different relationship, I think, that's very important to foster. So I just wanted to respond to that comment because I think it was spot on. But with SWAG, so SWAG came out of the same type of work that I was doing in the previous 3 years of teaching. Of exposing, inspiring, and empowering my students to really see their community not as static things, but as stuff that they could change, and problems and issues that they saw that they could actually change. So the actual title, as you said, was Serving While Achieving Greatness, Inc., or SWAG. And the purpose was to empower our young people to impact issues about which they were passionate. So we had 3 groups of students, and they each focused on each a separate issue. So one issue was the lack of extracurricular opportunities in the Bronx. The second one was substance abuse. And the third was teen pregnancy. And each group they self-selected to be in each of those groups. And we did leadership seminars where they heard from guest speakers. They developed skills in social media and community outreach. And the entire program culminated in a block party or fair where they had different booths, and we had over 500 people come, parents, siblings, fellow students, grandmothers, grandfathers, and they shared what they learned and shared materials and resources with the broader community. And for me, I thought that was incredibly powerful because I saw them grow through the year that we worked with those students. And it was 8th graders and 9th graders. And we saw that, you know, they no longer saw these issues as, you know, throwing our hands up and we can't make an impact on them, or we have to succumb to them. They saw that, you know, they had agency in their communities, and things that they saw, you know, they could actually change.
Powerful, very powerful.
You know what, Creighton? I try to always make good decisions. But one of the best decisions this week, and it was at the last, I want to let our audience know, Mr. Creighton carved out time in his schedule this week. And I'm glad you did, because last week we had a brother on there, young brother, 34 or 35, around the same age. And it is critical that our young black men see black men teaching, because he's a teacher up in a school in Oakland, teaches music. You went back, got your degree, and went back and started teaching, and still we're going to talk about some other stuff you're doing. But thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, sir, because we need, our young brothers and sisters need to see us behind that pole, teaching them how and what to do, and they respect you more versus other races in the classroom, trying to teach them. And your passion, as Dr. Ashley said, it is, you look like a phoenix coming up when you're talking about it. I mean, only thing you don't do is spread your wings out, like a phoenix just rising. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Doug. And you know, we all have a role to play. Everybody has something to contribute. That's one of the, you know, Nipsey Hussle was one of my favorite rappers, and that was one of his, you know, rap lines. He said, we all have something to contribute. And I think if we think about ourselves in society like that, you know, we all have a role to play. And Doug and Dr. Ashley, you guys are both playing powerful roles in your own communities. And, you know, we just got to keep pushing.
Well, I'm going to tell you this, young brother, if it wasn't for this doctor, I would have had a nervous breakdown, because briefly I had a fight over 3 years with a $1 billion company. And if I had this type of therapy, and let me just be clear, there were times I thought of not being able to make it out, because, you know, when you have a $1 million company and then you have a $1 billion company, as the brothers say, big money, big bank, ate little bank. Well, big bank ate little bank and kicked me to the curb, but they didn't realize this brother was what do you call one of them things that just won't die. I don't die, I multiply. I came back 3 years later and won. But the mental pressure, anxiety that I faced, I cried. What really helped me is going to the gym. But we gotta teach our young people how to fight mentally. Anybody can fight physically, but you gotta be able to do it mentally. So thank you for sharing that. What led you to pursue a law degree at New York University School of Law, sir? Thank you.
Sure. So I'll be brief, as brief as I can with this response. It really was the culmination of, you know, my experiences, as I mentioned. I saw different things, whether it was in East LA or Cairo or the South Bronx, that in the connection of it all were systems and structures that impacted people. And as a teacher, I was able to impact my students on a direct one-to-one level. And I felt like I was successful in that area, but there were so many other students that I wasn't able to impact. And they were impacted by the systems and structures of their neighborhoods and their communities. And, you know, I kind of thought about it as, you know, if I was an emergency room doctor and you have a patient coming in that has gotten shot and has 5 bullet wounds. The doctor can treat the bullet wounds and remove the bullets and patch the patient back up and make sure that he or she is healthy, and then send the person back out into the community. But then 2 weeks later, that person can get shot and killed. And how do we change, that system or that environment that allows somebody to get shot and killed, or that allows somebody to go hungry at night, or not have access to health care, or not have, the proper meal before school in the morning? So as I thought about what kind of impact I wanted to make after teaching, I thought, okay, I want to impact systems and structures. And I thought law school would be the best way to do that. And New York University School of Law has a really good public interest program where they focus on getting involved in the communities and working on criminal justice issues. So it seemed like a good fit, and I was able to stay in New York and continue to do some of the work that I started in the South Bronx, but doing more criminal justice work when I was in law school.
Wow, great. And so, Creighton, we know that at the start of your career, you were at a firm that also led you to engage in some pro bono work with criminal justice reform, police accountability, and immigration. Can you share a little bit about your pathway there, and just thinking of how these are very serious concerns continuing throughout our country? Can you share some reflections on that?
Sure. Yeah, so I ended up going to a big corporate law firm, and I'm still at one now. And the reality was, I graduated from law school with not just the $110,000 of student loan debt that I had from undergrad, but another 220 from law school. So
I'm sorry, Creighton, can you please say that again for all of us that feel your pain about loans and what that can mean? So again, how much loans did you graduate with, the gift that it's kept on giving?
And also want to put down Dr. Ashton Creighton and parents who are still paying those loans back.
Yeah, and it's a burden. I graduated with $330,000 of student loan debt, and it weighs on you. It's a cloud, and the worst thing about it, I think, is that it makes people go down routes that they wouldn't ordinarily have gone down, but for the fact that they had this gigantic payment on a monthly basis. And that really robs our society of people's potential and their joy and what they can actually bring to, their communities. I mean, there's so many different, perhaps artists and painters and musicians and teachers and community advocates that are out there that aren't able to really pursue their dreams or their true selves because they have to kind of chase the dollar and become, financially stable, which you can't blame because that's what this country is about. But we have to think about, how do we change the system that allows this to perpetuate?
I have to say something now. This is why the existence of Black Business Roundtable is here. Generational wealth, having other groups of people other than Black people having the resources and the money to fund their kids to where they can take trips and they don't have this heavy burden. That is one of the main reasons why this show is so important. What you two just said. I didn't graduate from college, but my daughter did, and I'm still paying the bill. I have friends, white friends, who had college funds set up, who had their parents left them $1 million house, and their parents left them, and their parents left them a college fund. So thank you too for articulating why this country needs to assess where we are and how it relates to helping all people get an education and not having to take that path that they have to take because they don't want to have a $200,000 or $300,000 loan a bill when they leave school. So thank you too for articulating that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the reality. And I think, what's also important, acknowledging what the reality is. I went to firm. I went to Skadden, which was an amazing firm. I had a lot of people that were supportive of me, and they provided pathways for me to get involved in things that I was really passionate about, and that was the pro bono work. And I got involved as an extension from some of the work that I did in law school, but also through a program that Skadden Arps had during my 1L year. They had my first year of law school. They had a program that allowed 1L first year students during their summer to work 4 weeks at the firm, 4 weeks at a firm client, and then 2 weeks at a public interest organization. And I ended up working at the South Bronx Legal Aid Society doing criminal defense work. And from that work, I decided to, in my second year of law school, do reentry work. So I worked on a clinic with two amazing Black professors, Kim Taylor Thompson and Tony Thompson. They were incredibly inspirational. And you know what? Tony Thompson was the first Black male professor I ever had in law school. And again, that kind of impact and seeing them, in the classroom and discussing, some of these really weighty topics was incredibly inspirational to me. So when I got to the firm, I felt, again, gotta continue the work that inspired me. And I was able to start working on an initiative with an organization in the South Bronx called the Bronx Defenders. And they are a prominent public defender organization. And we created a police accountability clinic that allowed victims of excessive force to come in and share their narratives. And we would, as attorneys, and there were law students, there were paralegals, we would type up their claim and submit it to the city so that they could either pursue a settlement action or they could pursue a civil rights case against those officers that harmed those individuals.
I gotta ask this question. What were the races and nationalities of most of the people coming in to get this free legal help?
Yeah, it was predominantly African-American and Latino.
Get out of here. I didn't think you were going to say that.
Yeah. And, and to be honest, some of the perpetrating officers were also African-American and Latino. And that's one of the things about, structures and systems. They can corrupt, and they can cause people to do things that they might not ordinarily do. And the narratives that I heard of people just being brutalized, a woman who was trying to catch a train and had to, she was trying to catch a train, subway train, to go get her daughter. So she went through an open door, and a undercover police officer, grabbed her, threw her to the ground. Scuffle ensued because she didn't know who he was, and she ended up getting just beaten by this police officer and a whole bunch of other police officers, taken out of the precinct and put in prison with her daughter waiting for her, not knowing where her mother was. And it's those types of narratives of actual pain that, it helped for individuals to share that, because number one, they felt validated and heard that, what happened to them was not right and was not acceptable and shouldn't have occurred. But they also felt like there was another avenue for them to get some relief. Now, whether or not they actually got that relief, we didn't take them all the way down that process. But I think it was really important for them to be heard first and foremost. But the pain and the trauma just doesn't go away like that. And, I overheard in the earlier segment of the trauma that, we are dealing with in respect to the pandemic. I mean, there's just so much trauma in our communities from other instances as well. And that just build and build and build and cause dislocation from communities and isolation that only, deepens and deepens and deepens. And that's another thing that we have to address as a society, whether it's mental health care and access to it, but also some of the systems that cause these things to happen in the first place.
Thank you, Creighton. Currently, you work for Baker McKenzie LP, an international corporate law firm. What is your specialty presently at your firm? Thank you, sir.
Sure. So this is the more business. This is the business aspect of it, and I do mergers and acquisitions. So I advise clients who are companies that are either trying to sell themselves or buy other companies. I advise those transactions. So they can be incredibly complicated. They could be small $1 million transactions or as big as multi-billion-dollar transactions. And right now, this is a really busy time, and Baker McKenzie, along with other law firms, are incredibly busy. And there's a real focus on client service, and that means that you're responding incredibly quickly whenever a client needs something, and you're really trying to deliver the best and quickest service as possible. So it can be a really demanding job, but it's helped me understand how to kind of, first of all, it's helped me understand how the business world works in terms of finance and in terms of large scale transactions such as mergers and acquisitions. But it's also helped me be a better detail oriented thinker as I draft different agreements between different parties and think about how to help structure transactions and create processes for a transaction to start at just a discussion between two parties to an agreement at the end.
Doug, before you ask the next question, because it's a pitch down the middle that I do not want to be interrupted. And Creighton, again, thank you for carving out time for being with us today. So I just want to do our last sponsorship. Just want to thank our sponsors. Then we're going to let you get to it because we want to hear about what you're doing in the Oakland community. So again, thank you, Mr. Donnie Glover of Black USA News and BeMoreNews.com for the opportunity to broadcast and for hosting Black Business Roundtable. As you can see, we're having important conversations about our community being centered, which is such a privilege. Want to just remind everyone again for our California listeners that ballots have been mailed in both District 18's runoff election and the California governor recall of Governor Newsom, a Democrat. And again, we want to invite you to vote. And as you're voting, ask yourselves, have I done my duty and voted, or will I waste an opportunity made easy due to every eligible voter being and ballot being mailed? So again, two very, very important elections, one specifically for the Bay Area and one for our California state at large. Doug, please ask this next question so we can hear about what Creighton is doing in the Oakland community.
Well, Mr. Creighton Davis, I know you personally on this answer right here. Mr. Creighton Davis, you currently serve as chair of Oakland Community Policing Advisory Board. The board has historically served as advisor to the chief of police, the police department, and the city on community matters. Can you explain your vision for community policing in Oakland and the role you think the board can play in enacting that vision and improving public safety in Oakland? Are you meeting open to the public? Excuse me. Are the meetings open to the public? And if so, how can the community participate? And I can't wait to hear your answer, sir.
Yeah, so Doug has some insider information here because he and I work very closely together on this board. Yeah, exactly. And he's such a valuable member, and he joined the board. Was it last year, Doug, or the beginning of this year?
Well, it was last year, and I remember because I applied for the commission, and then when I got on your board, the commission came back 2 months later and wanted me to get on the commission. But after working with you, Creighton, I would not leave until we get the job done. Thank you, brother.
Well, I appreciate you, Doug, and I want to shout out to all our CPAB board members because it really is a team effort. We have a really dedicated group of residents on our board that are passionate about impacting the community, but also tapped in, and they have their ears to the streets and are understanding what some of the issues are. And I really see our board as advocates for community members. And when you hear community policing, a a lot of people get, rightfully so, a lot of negative connotations. They think of enforcement. They think of neighborhood watch. They think of vigilantism. They think of George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. And, that's problematic. And I think, that model and what community policing means to people really discourages participation. So what our goal is as a board is to really move away from this enforcement-led model to one that focuses on two things: community engagement and neighborhood empowerment. And that's really led by the community in terms of keeping the community safe and finding resources at the community level, or knowing how to access resources through the city to solve problems rather than just picking up a phone and calling 911. So that's the crux of it, is really in increasing community engagement and empowering our residents to solve issues and address problems together, rather than calling a 911 number. Now, that's not to say that law enforcement should be completely excluded, because they are members of the community. But we need law enforcement to develop, first of all, trust with our community members. And then from that trust, there can be some healing and some addressing of the trauma that has occurred historically and ongoing. And from there, hopefully some relationships can be built that can develop into collaboration and partnerships where everyone is working together for the same goal of community cohesion and public safety. And I think, a lot of people say, well, we need law enforcement. Yes, but all the things that the community can do just by connecting and knowing one another, a neighbor knowing a neighbor, a neighbor knowing a neighbor two houses down the block, you're less likely if you're blasting music at 3 a.m. and your neighbor next door, who and have a relationship with, knocks on the door, hey, can you just turn it down? You're less likely to say, get out of my face. You're more likely to say, because I know you and I have a relationship with you, to say, okay, I'll turn it down because I know that, you have a 2-year-old kid that's trying to go to bed, or an elderly parent at home. And by building those connections and building those relationships, I think that's the first step. And from there, people can start working together and thinking about, how do we resolve disputes? How do we mediate conflicts so things don't escalate into violence and into actual problems that cause bodily harm to people? So that's the direction that we're trying to go. And I think there's a lot of support at the community level, but it's going to take time to kind of change the paradigm that folks have been living under, in terms of just thinking, okay, we can just call one resource to solve every problem. We have to be a little more thoughtful and nuanced, and we have to empower residents with the skills and the resources and the training to be able to understand how to navigate different city structures and different resources to get the result that they want.
Dr. Ashley,
Yeah.
you see why I wasn't going to leave this committee?
Oh yeah, no, I definitely understand, and it actually got me excited. So I'm gonna shift from the question I was originally going to ask and go deeper, because I know in your background, Creighton, you have curriculum building, you have community intervention, and on the micro macro levels. So I'm curious. I'm in the same age group as you. Also, I'm from Oakland, so we're both Bay Area natives, and I'm really curious about the bridging of the gap for this community, and what are your ideas on how to get that? Right now we've had Janani Ramachandran on here and have been a great supporter of her ideas. She's been in the community, but I'm just really curious, because in our age group, we're right there in that gap, right? The older millennials. What are some ideas to kind of work on building healing, right? The trauma that's happened in the community, and really activating the Bay Area natives who are still there. We know a lot of them have moved due to gentrification and the outrageous housing prices, but I'm just curious about, what are your ideas on bridging that gap?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think it first starts with creating spaces where people can come together and around, shared goals and objectives. And, when I think about just bridging the gap between, between law enforcement and traumatic events and community members, how do we create a restorative justice space where folks can come in and honestly share their pain and their trauma, and have OPD officers listen and take it in and understand, you know, how either past actions or current actions have caused a certain impact on an individual, and then have that officer also have an opportunity to share his or her own perspective, so that the individual understands, well, you know what, maybe it wasn't just a bad intent. Maybe it was something else, or maybe it was a bad intent, and now he knows better or she knows better. But that connection has to occur. But then I think we also have to go to our schools, and we have to work with our students and our young people, and we have to also bring in, just like you're saying, some of the people in our age bracket, to see that, okay, well, the way our communities are, it's not static. And how do we work together, and how do we work with our young people in schools to develop projects in spaces in parks or on blocks where they can actually make something happen, whether it's as simple as a mural or a cleanup or some kind of organized event where folks are moving together and working together. I think that's the start, but it has to come in spaces, and cultivating spaces. But I think that's been one of the biggest challenges of the pandemic, where we haven't been able to gather together, and we haven't been able to move together and work together and talk together. So I'm hopeful that as we hopefully move past yet another wave, we can at least come together and start working together in different spaces.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Doug, you're muted.
A mistake I make almost 5 times a day.
Let me ask you this: given the upcoming elections here in Oakland for the assembly seat, the recall election for governor, and the midterm election in 2022, what do you think are some of the most pressing issues we face as a society?
That's a great question, and it's a wide-ranging one. And I think instinctually things that come to mind are climate change, social inequality, income inequality, the criminal justice system, voting. But I think all of it comes together in one aspect, particularly in this country, of how people view others in society, and whether they think should be considered part of society, part of the American fabric or not. I think the battles that we're facing right now are ones of trying to hold on to whatever vestiges of white supremacy or power that folks have been able to accumulate, versus the rising tide of more diversity and more inclusion in spaces and more platforms for folks to develop, like this one, and learn and develop generational wealth. And there's a clash under the fundamental definition of who is American, what does it mean to be American, and what does it mean to be a member of a community. And that could be seen as on the macro scale of who is American, what does it mean to be American, but it's also at the micro scale of who is a member of our community. Like Dr. Ashley, you mentioned, the gentrification of what's going on in Oakland. Folks call in the cops on somebody who is unfamiliar to them, where that person may have lived on that block for years and decades and have family members that are there. And it's that same kind of question of, who is a part of this community? And we really have to bridge that gap. And I think that's at the core of it. But it comes again to cultivating spaces where folks can come together, and creating systems and structures on the other side that encourage folks to come together, but also empower folks to get involved and to have an impact in their communities and in the broader country. So I think all of that, as we're kind of placed against poles, we have a tendency to yell across one another, but we're going to continue to be entrenched unless we figure out a way to kind of work together. And we're not going to get everybody. We're not going to be able to get everybody, but we have to build coalitions that allow us to work together and really address those big issues: climate change, voting, the criminal justice reform, and I think most of all, social inequality. I mean, we live in a country where people are struggling to get by, yet we have just ridiculous, exorbitant wealth at the top. How do we bridge that gap? Because the farther that gap grows, the more that we're going to have this feeling of sickness in society, because people are going to feel that they're not included because they can't access some of the things that others can.
Dr. Ashley, do you have one last question for Mr. Creighton?
Ooh.
If not, I got a good one.
You got a good one? I will pass. I was a shooting guard, but I will play like a point guard and pass. Pass first. Pass first. Get in my Russell Westbrook. Pass first. So go ahead and knock it out the park.
Hey, he's got to get his passing on. I mean, we'll see what happens with him and LeBron.
In a mid-range jumper, but that's okay. I got a Christmas list coming. I got a Christmas list.
Right. Dr. Ashley is an avid sports person. I've learned from her, and I'm going like, okay, who's the point guard again? Creighton, as someone who remains passionate about education through your work on the boards of Orem Preparatory, a middle school in East Oakland, and it's under Acts Gospel Bishop Bob Jackson, and the Center of Youth Development Through Law, an organization that promotes educational achievement and legal knowledge through a summer legal curriculum and summer internship. Briefly, what are your thoughts on education today, and what advice would you give a young listener? Thank you.
Yeah, that's another great question. I want to quickly shout out Orem Prep, because they're doing some amazing work out in East Oakland, predominantly people of color staff, African American, executive director and leader of the school, and they are making incredible strides for their students. I think over this past year, there was this state assessment where 95% of students, I think, passed, and that was in a pandemic. And
wait, can you give that number again?
Yes, I'm going to read it because I've got it. The year. Also, 95% of students tested for the state test last year made an average of more than a year's worth of growth while learning online. 95% of students made a year's worth of growth. So you have students that are coming in at the 6th grade level, reading at a 3rd or 4th grade level. So they are pushing students ahead, and it's inspiring work. And they're doing it at Axville Gospel Church out in East Oakland. So
what is the nationality of most of these young people?
That's right, African American and Latino. That's it. That's right. That's right. And what it comes down to, to the question, we have to see our kids as incredibly capable,
right?
Limitless potential. Because when we see our kids that way, then we don't want to waste that potential. We don't want to waste those gifts. And I think so often, in our schools and in our education system, we put people on one track of, okay, well, you're either just going by the books and reading the books and doing well academically, but what about the arts? Mm-hmm. What about athletics? What about music? What about all these other things that are important to cultivate a young mind and a person, And we have to really stretch out beyond this just like one track paradigm, because that's what they're doing in the suburbs. That's what they're doing at the private schools. The kids are getting these broad access to a variety of different modalities where they can learn and express themselves. And I think our kids need that as well.
I'd like to say this of a parent of a daughter who just graduated from USF, and she has a master's degree. When I had, thank you. When I graduated from Oakland Public School, and I'm not putting them down or up. I'm going to point out facts. In my high school and junior high school, I had to worry about being the best hand-to-hand combat person versus the best reader. I had to figure out how to be the best everything other than English, math, and arithmetic. When my daughter started going to school, I sent her to St. Lawrence O'Toole, which is a private school. I sent her to St. Joe in Alameda, which is a private school, and they both charge like college preparatory school. But when she graduated from St. Joe, she had a 4-year scholarship to USF, still had to pay some of that money, or chunk of that money, because she was on campus. And then she went on to get her master's degree, and I'm still paying for that. The point I'm making here is people have this tendency of saying, well, we need to put our kids in public school. We need to. I'm saying that you put your kid in the best school that's going to prepare them for success. You being on these private school boards and stuff, can you elaborate on that for a few minutes? Because I'm tired of hearing people say, well, put them in Oakland Public School. We have to get our Oakland Public School up to where they are training all kids to be successful and academically prepared, so when they go to university, they don't fail. Thank you.
Yeah. I think you're voicing the desires of so many parents. They want their kids to be successful, and they want their kids to be in environments that allow them to be positioned for success. And, I was in the South Bronx. I was a public middle school teacher. It wasn't a charter school. It wasn't a private school. It was a public middle school. And for me, there was a lot of joy being in that environment because of the diversity of that environment, which I didn't get at the schools that I went to. I went to St. Ignatius up in San Francisco, which didn't have, there were about, I think six Black people in my class out of a class of 300. And that's 350 actually, I think. And that was the environment that, that I learned in. And that, has some significant faults and can have some significant, traumas as well that come with that type of environment. But to your point, I think that we have to number one, ensure that all of our schools are up to par, and we have to invest in all of our schools. But there should be no shame in a parent who is in East Oakland, who has a choice between a school and says, hey, listen, Orem Prep is a great school and I want to send my kid there. They should have that opportunity. But that is not the silver bullet to solving the educational inequity. We have to improve all our schools. And I know there are probably some great schools in Oakland. I know there are. I know there's some great public schools in Oakland. But I know parents are also, making decisions, and we just have to lift the boat or lift the tide that lifts all boats.
I'm gonna be real brief because we're running with 7 minutes or left. Also, you parents out there, you got to step in too. Go to the kids' parent-teacher conference. Go up there and develop a relationship with the teacher. These parents just send their kids to school, and then when they flunk out, they go, well, they blame it on the school. No, it's the parents' fault just as much as it is the school. Thank you.
And I do want to say, though, I am a big proponent of public schools. I'm a big proponent, but I think we have to do better in all our schools, really, to create a holistic way of teaching our kids that really allows them to be who they are, but also allows them to explore in ways that I didn't get a chance to. One thing that we did in my classroom in the South Bronx was we started meditating on desks in our classroom. And well, they weren't little, they were 7th, 8th graders. They were big by that point. They were sitting on the desks with their legs folded, breathing deeply. And it was a beautiful, powerful thing to watch. And there's some kids that still do it to this day. So we have to expose our kids to as much as possible, because you never know what is going to stick.
Dr. Ashley, before we close this out, would you like to say anything? And Creighton, would you like to wrap up? Because this has been an amazing show. Thank you.
Creighton, I just want to thank you for being a guest on the show and thank you for what you're doing globally, right? I see you when I talk to my students, I talk about the opportunities to be a global citizen and the flexibility and your willingness to serve wherever you're placed. And I think, I know you also coached boys and girls basketball, and I think there's just something about being ready when your number is called. And again, just thriving wherever you are in whatever circumstance, and that those values will allow your journey to unfold the way it is. So just excited to see someone else, Bay Area native Black man, doing wonderful things in the community. So thank you. Yes, and just really learned a lot from you today.
No, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I feel this is oftentimes we have these Zoom calls, and I feel like I'm just talking to a screen, but I actually feel like I'm talking to the both of you, and it feels really personal and just powerful, as you said, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to staying in touch with both of you. Obviously, Doug, I'm gonna see you too soon.
Well, as we wrap it up, let me just tell you both this, since you're half my age. It's you young people who are going to make a difference in this world. And it's also you young people who are young Black people who look at and say, hey, that's a doctor, that's a lawyer, and they look like me. I can be them. Thank you both. And Dr. Ashley, we'll see you next week. And Mr. Creighton Davis, I'll see you at the next CPAB meeting, Community Police Advisory Board.
That's right, next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. And thank you for sharing and coming on the show. And I hope that you come back. We would love to hear some of the great things you're doing. And let me be clear. I look to be on your campaign when you run for something, because we need men like you out there making a difference. Thank you.
Well, it was an honor to be on here with you guys. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you to our weekly special guest, and happy birthday to Dr. Ashley Coleman, doctor of psychology, and of course.
Thank you.
Oh, happy birthday. I didn't know.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I'm riding the wave from last week, and I'm going to take it into the end of this month. It was on the 20th. Thank you.
Don't let it stop. Yeah.
Well, we also want to look forward to seeing Larry Lewis next week. He had to take care of some business. And Larry Lewis, we would love to get your perspective, especially in light of the 12 Marines that were gunned down. And the 15 Marines that are injured while we try to get our people out and those who help the United States make that country better. Congratulations to Janani Ramachandran, Esquire, candidate for California 18th Assembly District and securing a place in this heated runoff election scheduled for August 31st weekend. Learn more about Janani Ramachandran. Visit Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and review her platform at Janani for California. Thank you again to our guests, Creighton Davis, Esquire, an up and coming leader in our community and really being in a position to teach one and reach one. Thank you, sir. Lighting up our youth with education. My brother, my man. And I'm glad I didn't go on the police commission. I'm glad I stayed with you, because I'm with a winner. You are a winner, my brother. And once again, when you run, I'm running with you. Thank you. A special shout out to Donnie Glover and current sponsor, Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Thank you, Tammy Willis, for your support. We also have a network of shows hosted by Donnie Glover, such as Chapin Friends. On Mondays, Party Marty, Let's Talk. On Tuesday, Sister Biz with Nicole and Tamara on Wednesday. And Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard on Friday. So be sure to check out these Black voices and guiding lights in our community. Thank you, audience, for tuning in. And remember, together we can listen, we can learn, and share, because I know you care. This is Doug Blacksher, the Black Business Roundtable. God bless and good night. Thank you all.